Hi everyone. Now today I'm doing a video on a situation I found myself in once while I was travelling. Now some of you might know that I spent 20 years both living in the bush and travelling around the countryside with my pack donkeys. And during that time I had a number of near-death experiences, and today's video is describing one of those experiences. Okay, so this was a time, only a few years into my travels, when I was travelling with my pack donkeys, and it was the middle of winter. It was a cold day. I was walking along an isolated road in farming country, and I noticed that there was a lot of cloud building up, and we were hurrying to try and find some shelter, and there was no shelter anywhere. This was probably the first time ever I've been in an area where there was no shelter belts of cypresses on the sides of the roads planted by farmers to protect their stock from wind. There was just nothing. It was just totally open countryside. And quickly those clouds built up into a really vicious storm. There was nothing we could do. The wind was so strong that I could barely keep my feet, and it was driving rain and hail, just icy rain. It was so incredibly cold, and all we could do was just stand with our backs to the rain and just wait it out. While we were standing there in the rain, I noticed that close by there was a farmhouse, and there was a shed there by the road, facing the road, and there was a farmer in there watching us. And so when there was a little bit of a break in the weather, and we were just soaked to the skin and freezing cold, I walked over there and asked this farmer for shelter. I wasn't asking for much. I wasn't asking for a bed for the night or anything, just to throw my swag in his shed and wait it out while the storm blew out overnight. That's all. But I was refused shelter there. First time ever. Look, I come off a farm. Our family would never have refused any sort of help to anyone, and no farmers I knew would ever refuse help. Even before that, I'd never had that sort of reaction. But anyway, so he refused me shelter, so we went to walk on to the next place. By the time we got to the next place, we were so cold that we were shivering. And we were refused shelter again. And by that time, we could barely move. I was shivering and shaking. So we went on the road again. And we were so cold that we could barely move. We could barely walk. I think it took probably over an hour to get to maybe 2 kilometres to the next farmhouse. Just trying to put one foot in front of the other, just turning to ice. Anyway, so we got to the third farmhouse, and we were refused shelter again. I knew I couldn't go any further. My donkeys weren't in much better condition than me at that time. Donkeys are made for hot, dry conditions. They're not good. They don't have thick coats. Their coats aren't waterproof. They get cold very easily. So I begged this farmer for some sort of shelter, and eventually he let me sleep in his kid's little plastic cubby house. So I managed to tether the donkeys next to one of his sheds out of the wind. By this time I could barely move, I was just so cold. So I looked in his shed. This was a dairy farmer. I come off a dairy farm, so I know that dairy farmers in winter often buy high calorie food waste from factories to feed to their cattle to try and keep them warmer. And luckily for me, the food waste in this farmer's shed was from a lolly factory, you know, tooth lollies, jelly babies, that sort of thing. So after I unsaddled my donkeys, got them ready to spend the night, I took them each a few handfuls of these lollies and ate some myself. And I managed through sheer will to grab my swag and some dry clothes and get myself in that little cubby house, crawl in there. Wasn't much room, but it was better than nothing. And I still remember how difficult it was to get out of those wet clothes and into dry clothes with my fingers not being able to work, with my arms and legs being hardly able to move them and shaking terribly. I got my swag out. I did get into dry clothes and got into my swag, and I still remember putting my ID and details next to my head just in case I didn't wake up the next morning. That's how bad I felt. The farmer didn't come and offer me a cup of tea. Nobody in the family even came and checked on me the next morning, even after they finished milking and had gone back inside the house. So even though I was sore the next morning, just got up and left. But there really wasn't any lessons to be learned from this experience. I would have made exactly the same choices, not knowing what was going to happen later on in the day. So I'm not making this video to tell you, oh, here are the lessons you should learn, this is what you should do in these situations. I was experienced enough that maybe I should have been able to read the weather better. But anyway, the reason I'm making this video is just to say that things happen in life. I suppose I should point out that maybe there's a reason why these farmers didn't offer me shelter, and that's because in hyper and hypothermia, when you're too hot or too cold, even though your brain your brain seems clear and able to think and that, but if you're somebody looking at a person in that situation, you can see that they're making bad decisions, they're talking nonsense, and I could have been talking like I was on drugs or something. But then again, on the other hand, these farmers could obviously see how cold and wet I was, so I don't see that as an excuse. But anyway, getting back to the video, it's just, yeah, life throws you curveballs. Sometimes, well, there's no use in blaming yourself for anything, and especially for bad decisions or bad luck. It's just a case of no matter what sort of life you lead, bad things happen, and it's okay. You just have to live with that. So, so really, you may find this just a useless video, but hopefully you found it interesting anyway. Maybe if you're ever in that sort of position, you might make different decisions and do different things, and I hope you're never in that position. Okay, so that's my very short story. I will see you in the next video.